Can't remove the charge? Well, I'll just use it then, by UserAgrant03. In the early 2000s when I first moved out on my own, I rented from a complex that charged you for assigned parking. It was an upcharge of $25 a month. If you didn't get assigned parking, you would have to fight for a space on the street. My apartment was in the back of the complex and I was getting over a recent knee and ankle injury, so I opted for paid parking that was relatively close to my front door. My car was a junker, 3 years older than I am, but it ran semi-okay and the heater worked. As a newly minted adult, I was happy to have it. About 3 months into my lease, my car went to the great scrap heap in the sky. I had gotten used to the local transit system and discovered a nearby store would drop off groceries for me. This was long before Walmart and other stores started doing it, so it was cheaper than figuring a month's supplies on the bus. So I opted not to replace the car and utilize the bus pass my work reimbursed me for. I went to my leasing office and told them I no longer needed the space, and would you please remove the extra charge from my bill. The manager at the desk was new and had never been asked that before. She promised to look into it and let me know. I was naive and figured it would be gone come next month. Nope. It was still there. I paid all but the parking space and called up the complex. Same girl. She said she was awaiting word from higher-ups and offered me a credit for the charge as a one-time courtesy. I reminded her that I no longer owned a car, I hadn't just changed my mind. I told her that the space had been empty for close to a month now and that I won't be utilizing it. She said she understood loud and clear and would get it sorted by next month. 3 days before rent was due, she finally got back to me. Apparently, it was in my lease and couldn't be removed without breaking the lease and signing a new one. Even if I didn't move out, the lease breaking and initiation fees would be charged to me, and my rent would go up to the new current market value. This would be over $1,000, so not an option for someone freshly on their own. I kept the parking space on the lease. 3 weeks later, I was reviewing my lease to get the phone number for maintenance, and noticed the clause for the parking space. Essentially, I could park a motorcycle, scooter such as Vespa, car, truck, SUV, or trailer in the space. Gears were turning. For me to be in compliance, I had to have wheels on anything parked in my space. So I went to my local version of Craigslist and found a wheeled container similar to a shipping container. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth every cent. The complex offered storage sheds at an upcharge too. Being fresh out of high school, I didn't have much to store. My neighbor though, did. I threw a lock on the unit and offered it to my neighbor for half the cost of a shed, $35 a month. He was able to move his stuff out of his storage unit where he was paying over $100 a month, and the container was available 24/7/365. He was happy for the arrangement and paid several months in advance. The complex put several tow stickers for out of compliance on the trailer, but I called the tow company and faxed them a copy of the lease where it says trailers are allowed. The container was registered with the county as a utility trailer, so there's nothing they could do. They tried to fine me for improper parking, but again, I had proof I was within my rights. They even offered to remove the charge for parking on my lease if I would relocate the container. With what my neighbor was paying, I could cover my water bill every month, so I declined. I stayed 18 months, and sold the trailer to my neighbor when I moved out. He had to rent a car to relocate it to his assigned space, but he said it was worth the couple hundred he paid. He ended up saving over $1,000 a year renting from me. Other neighbors even started bringing in their own containers too, even if it meant getting a second space. Sheds were being vacated at such a large volume, the complex tried to give them away at 6 months free. Few took them up on it. The complex amended the new leases to exclude trailers, but could do nothing about those that already had them in the spot. Instead of moving out and giving notice, renters would reassign their lease to new people so they could be grandfathered into the trailer clause. I drove by the facility 2 years or so after I moved out, going to a friend's for Thanksgiving. The complex had been sold to a new owner and changed their name. But wouldn't you know, there were still about a dozen wheeled shipping containers parked in the lot. Edit as there's some confusion and people are fighting. The trailer was small. Think of 4 dog kennels in a 2x2 configuration. You could fit a table and chairs in there, but you'd scape the ceiling. It was in rough shape. This was back when the dollar store, not Dollar Tree, sold spray paint, and I took care of repainting it myself. I negotiated drop-off to the complex from the seller, and with the spray paint and delivery, I think I was out like $700. Keep in mind, this is not the massive 40-foot trailer picture I posted a few times as a reference. It's that style of trailer. Registering the trailer was super duper cheap, like around $30 and possibly even less. When I sold it to my neighbor, I got $300 or so for it. I took a loss, but without a car, I didn't want it, and he approached me first when he found out I was moving. There were a number of colleges and universities near where I rented. Most leases banned subleasing, but lease changeovers were commonplace. You go to the complex and tell management, "I'm done renting here," but instead of breaking the lease, my friend is going to do the rest of my term. You usually didn't get the deposit back as it stayed with the new renter, but you didn't an exorbitant pay a lease break fine. It also kept the apartment seamlessly occupied, without tenant gaps, which most places needed. If they sold the trailer to the next guy or to their neighbor, I am uncertain. I wasn't privy to those decisions. All I know is 2 years later, they were no longer XYZ Complex, but under a different name, and a dozen or so trailers still remained. As for the 18 months I stayed, 1 year in a lease, 6 months at month to month. In my state, addendums to leases require you to enter into a new leasing term, and that was not gonna happen. IDR if they charged a month-to-month fee if I didn't renew my lease, as it was close to 20 years ago. I've been month-to-month for 3 years at the place I have been living for 4. Some places charge 1, some don't. Rent can still go up, but changes to the lease that are substantial cannot take place unless I sign a new lease agreement. I have had to look up laws and advocate for myself a lot because of BS like this. The tow company was mom and pop. They were not predatory, and I knew that multiple illegal tows could get their license pulled. The minute that first tow sign went up, I was practically shoving my paperwork down their face. No way that could play the ignorance card after that. They still exist to this day and now have multiple locations. In fact, they are the assigned tower for my current complex too, ironically. Finally, storage sheds or units are required by my state to be month to month. It's a state law that goes back to at least the 1980s, and I have had to memorize a lot of laws regarding storage for my job. So, the apartment couldn't force anyone to keep their sheds, so my neighbor cancelled at the end of his next month. Great guy. Lived in a 3-bed with a set of twins, 1 boy, 1 girl. As for this being fake or made up, I feel like I have enough specific info to prove that it's not. And if you still don't believe me, oh well. I posted this for y'all's enjoyment. I really appreciate the awards and upvotes, but I DC about internet points. Thank you to everyone that did a thing, and I love all the comments. That's the extent though. Maternity wear, by user at Coop. This happened several years ago. After onboarding a new job, I was told I could hire an assistant. The HR director, Kelly, handed me a stack of resumes, told me about a friend's daughter, and bumped Kot to the top of my interview list. Kot passed the tech test with high scores and interviewed well, so I hired her. Kot showed up to work on time, had a good attitude, performed well on assignments, and was generally a pleasant person all around. After probation, Kot was excited to tell me that her last raise was enough to get an apartment with her BF. It was a couple months after her raise I started to notice Kelly spending an inordinate amount of time talking to Kot. The convos sounded personal/cordial, and Kelly was friends with Kat's mom, so I didn't think much about it, until one day Kelly barges in my office. "Did you know Kot moved into an apartment with her boyfriend?" "I might have heard something about that." "Well, Kot is pregnant and her mom is devastated." And proceeds to fill me in on the details on Kat's personal life. Uncomfortably, I interrupt, acting like I have a lot going on. This really isn't any of my business. If there's something related to Kat's performance that we need to discuss, please fill me in, but as for me, Kot is doing a great job. A few months pass. Kat's baby bump is starting to show. Kelly is again in my office. Kot is not in compliance with the dress code. Last staff meeting, Kelly handed out a dress code policy with a collage various women's shoes and dresses and suits presumably cut from fashion magazines to assist us determine what was acceptable from what was not. I picked up the policy and the clip art sheets with a stare reminiscent of Jack Nicholson's I'm of a mind to make some Mookie Batman/Joker scene. Is she wearing something in the not allowed clippings? As I began to spread the clip art around my desk. She isn't wearing maternity clothes, as Kelly points to the bullet about maternity clothes in the policy. Well, the policy clearly says maternity wear is allowed. Kot is clearly pregnant and she is wearing clothes, so. You know what I mean when I say maternity clothes. Clothes from a maternity store. I told Kelly that I would talk to Kot, which I did. Kot filled me in that there was some drama with her mom not liking her BF, that Kelly is involved. etc. etc. I just told her to read the policy and be sure she complies, and no matter what, to trust me. I had her back. The next day Kelly is in my office telling me that Cod is again not in compliance with the dress code. At this point Kelly knows I'm getting frustrated. Okay. I'll talk to her again. This time I want you present because I'm going to give her a formal warning and assign remedial training. I bring Cod into my office with Kelly present and formally read off my prepared statement making it clear that it will go into her permanent file. Cod, you were given a verbal warning yesterday to comply with this dress code. Because it is not clear to me what is or is not a violation of this policy, you are to report to the HR office 10 minutes early every morning for the next 2 weeks for dress code inspection. Report to me if HR finds your dress unfit. If you are found to be in violation of this policy and are unable to correct your dress before the start of the workday, your employment will be terminated. By the time I'm finished, Cod is tearing up and Kelly is staring at the floor, speechless. I dismiss Cod. I hope that this is the last I hear about this because if I do, I'll fire her as Kelly, speechless, walks out of my office. I told Cod not to worry about any of this, we have them where we want them. So, for a week Cod reported to me that her clothes were fine per HR inspection. At the beginning of the second week she was chuckling, Kelly told me that I look very nice today. Attitudes began to change and everyone was smiling. I got called to the red carpet by Jim, the CEO. He tried to keep a straight face as he recited what he heard was going on and asked me to cut the remedial training short because it was embarrassing the HR staff. Straight-faced I said, well, Jim, if I stop the remedial training, I'd have to fire Cod. Company policy clearly states that failure to complete a formal remediation plan is immediate termination. It is very clear, there is zero tolerance. You can't fire a pregnant woman for what she wears. I'm asking, no, I'm telling you to stop. Stop following company policy. Laughing he concedes okay. I am rescinding that ridiculous dress code policy effective immediately. Company saves cost by taking away company cars, by user daft_boy_dim. About 6 years ago I worked for Power Supply Company in the UK. I worked in a small project team that coordinated all the company's major infrastructure projects and the role required travel to meetings all over the country. We'd average around 800 miles a week in company miles over the year, depending on time of year and location of projects etc. Someone in the finance department had reviewed our expense claims and calculated that over 1 quarter we'd not covered the required number of company miles to meet the company's policy on company cars. For that 1 quarter without looking at any other data, we lost our company car entitlement and the company told us we had to return the fleet company at the end of their leases. Malicious compliance activated. As we were project engineers we had a very particular set of skills for knowing how to follow rules to the letter and how to do so in a manner that benefited the company or project or individuals. Usually if it benefited the company it benefited all involved. This was not one of those occasions. We pay benefit in kind tax on our company cars in the UK, the rules around this changes as and when the government feel like it. My team had all carefully chosen out cars to be zero cost to ourselves by choosing cars that were below the allowance of £300 month so the remaining allowance covered the tax obligation. We'd all be screwed by the benefit in kind tax changes that year and were now paying tax. So for starters we reviewed the company car policy, and found the company had no way of stopping us handing our cars back with immediate effect, whilst the company was still responsible for the leases. So we all made arrangements for personal cars and handed our keys over at the next team meeting. We'd also reviewed the company travel policy. We started using hire cars and trains for traveling. Trains and hire cars in the UK are not cheap, as none of us were willing to use our personal cars and claim the 50p per mile. Usually we'd work a long day and book a bit of overtime or lieu to drive to and from meetings without staying over as we would prefer to be at home even if it meant getting home late. That stopped with immediate effect. We'd only work the mandated 7.5-hour day then stop book into a hotel and take full advantage of the £25 food and drink allowance for dinner. Then work from home the following day as we'd been away from home the previous day, as per the policy. After about 8 weeks we were called into a meeting with our line manager and department manager about our expenses. Our expenses for the first month after the cars had been returned were more than they were for the previous 12 months combined. Our line manager agreed that our expenses were in line with the policy, otherwise he wouldn't have signed them off. The department manager told us we were getting company cars back and he expected the expenses to return to previous levels. We declined the offer of company cars and let management know we'd be adhering to the travel policy to the letter. TLDR, large company spends magnitudes more money by implementing cost savings. You want to be notified every time I brush my teeth? No problem, by user on alas. This is a smaller one and it happened when I was still living in a student dorm the first few years of university. Each room in my dorm had their own sink, with showers and toilets in a shared space, so you could at least brush your teeth and get ready in peace. I happened to have a next-door roommate, who I very seldomly saw, due to our schedules. However, you could hear the water running from time to time. I have an electric toothbrush, which is important for the story. One day I was brushing my teeth as usual and rushing out the door to university when said roommate came out of his room with a wolfish grin. One alas, you can just call me next time you feel the need to run the electric thing in your room. At first I didn't get it, then I was quite disgusted, as he obviously thought I was using my vibrator twice a day and had put more thought into this than I'd liked. While I do own several toys, my bed was on the complete opposite end of the room, so as far away from the shared wall as possible. At night, I was still disgusted by his behavior when I got the idea to just do what he wanted me to. So I grabbed my toothbrush, knocked on his door and smiled as sweetly as possible. Neighbor, I need to use my electric device now and since you offered your help. His face lit up until I shoved my toothbrush in his face and realization dawned. I've never seen anyone turn this red this fast. For the next few weeks I knocked on his door every time I brushed my teeth. And since I decided my dental hygiene was a priority now, I upped brushing my teeth from twice to thrice a day. He got super uncomfortable every time I knocked and asked him about dental hygiene tips, but he never was creepy towards me again. Edit. It just dawned on me there might be a possibility he masturbated to the sound of me brushing my teeth thinking it was something completely different. Poor soul. Milking it? Okay, we will work during the week, by user Speedy Gonna Garbage. Many years ago I was doing some installation work at a customer's site. It was a multi-week job and included running fiber optic cabling, power lines, and installing various terminals and nodes. The customer had negotiated a weekly payment plan based on progress. Due to the fact that the site was an operating business, we did everything we could to minimize the disruption. To that end, we worked Wednesday to Sunday and stayed away Monday and Tuesday. At the end of the first week, the finance department contacted the customer to process the first payment. The customer explained that they wouldn't pay, and understood now why it costs so much when your staff aren't working during the week and only working at the weekends so they can get double pay. It was fairly common for Saturdays to pay time and a half, and Sundays to pay double time, but only after you had worked a full week. My manager didn't get the chance to explain that we were working our weekends to minimize the impact on her business because she never stopped ranting and raving. So, we stopped working at weekends and instead went back to Monday to Friday, blocking doors so customers couldn't enter the store, turning off power so we could run and connect cables. It was amusing to hear the customer begging my manager to change the working hours because they were losing business. I remember laughing when he did that typical salesman approach of sucking through his teeth as he was saying, well, of course if we have to work at weekends there would be an increase in costs.